Hello, my name is Helen Oshislawski, and thank you for joining me for a HIPAA Minute. Today's question is, if a patient asks me to not send their health information to their payer, do I have to comply with this request? As of September 23, 2013, patients will have the legal right under HIPAA to request that a provider not share their information with their payer if the patient has paid for an item or service out of pocket and in full. If a patient requests such a restriction, the provider must comply with this request. This will require the provider to somehow flag or make a notation in the patient's record that the health information is restricted and to ensure that it is not inadvertently released to the patient's health plan. A provider is not, however, required to segregate out that restricted information from the patient's general medical record. In addition, if the patient's payment method fails, for example, payment is never sent or a check bounces, then the provider may seek payment for the item or service despite the patient's request for a restriction. But the provider must make a reasonable effort to first contact the patient and try to obtain payment before submitting the claim to the payer. A provider is not obligated to restrict disclosures of the information to any other person or party other than the patient's health insurance. Therefore, if the patient's otherwise private pay and restricted visit would include the need for the provider to call in a prescription to the patient's pharmacy, the provider is not required to ensure that the pharmacy then takes care not to submit a claim to the patient's insurance for payment for the prescribed medication. The federal government explained in the HITECH amendment to HIPAA that the patient would need to separately request the pharmacy to restrict the prescription information from being submitted to the payer, and to confirm that the patient would be paying for the prescription and medications out of pocket and in full. I hope that you found this HIPAA Minute helpful and will join me again soon. Please remember that the HIPAA Minute is not legal advice, and if you have a specific legal question or have questions about HIPAA, you should consult with an attorney who can advise you directly.